There Is No Godcast, the official podcast of Northern Indiana Atheists. And now, here's your host, Noah Bush.
What's up, all you non-believers, and welcome back to There Is No Godcast, the only show where I can drink live on the air and nobody really cares. Joined today, we're twice in a row. We're going to do a guest host wire to wire because it worked out so nicely last time. We're also going to be making TING history because, we've only done 7 episodes, so I guess really every episode there's going to be a first of some kind or another. But this is our first repeat guest. Welcome back to the show, Doug Furgason. Welcome back.
Yes, I only came back because you said that we'd be drinking while we're doing the show. So I was like, all right,
Yes.
I guess I'm on board.
Well, I think if we're going to rewind from like 9.5 minutes ago when we decided to do this, you were like, because we talked about last night you coming back on the show. I wasn't able to work out a guest for this week. I have a kind of a list of people, but there was 1 or 2 people who I was kind of working on for this week, and just neither of them worked out for scheduling reasons. So you and I were chatting, like yesterday? And I was like, hey, you want to come on the show? And you were like, hell, sure, why not? And then you messaged me like 20 minutes ago, and you're like, hey, I'm almost home. You're like, I've been drinking. Is that okay? And I was like, I'll go get some drinks too, and we'll have a party tonight, and we'll talk about atheism. How are you feeling, Doug?
I'm feeling great. Yeah, that was what happened. So I had gotten a little behind on listening to the last couple episodes. So I had missed the mini episode, and then I had missed the episode after that. And so, I needed to catch up, and then once I caught up, I had some things to talk about, and there's been a lot of things that I just feel like would be a good opportunity, and we can just talk about all of it. So
right. Coming back on the show would be the appropriate place to talk about having been on the show. It seems like it makes sense to me.
Perfect.
You got to tell me though, your life clearly must have changed dramatically. I'm sure people are coming up to you on the streets. I'm sure people are recognizing you and hey, are you the guy who was on There Is No Godcast? I'm sure you're just getting hounded incessantly because of all the attention that you must be getting.
Yes, the notoriety is just going crazy because of such exposure that we've had. But no, since the last time we talked, I have... actually, in the past week, I can't say that it happened too long ago, but I did reach out to the Detroit Atheist group, and they are having a get-together this Tuesday at Logan Steakhouse, because quite clearly, where else do you go to talk about the non-existence of God besides Logan Steakhouse? But I am planning on going to that, and hopefully, I can bring to light and kind of maybe we can sort of build some sort of partnership between the two things and everybody that's in this community. So I am going to get more involved with my local atheist group as well, and that's part of the what I want to continue to go forward. So I'm looking forward to that, and that's on this Tuesday.
That's fantastic, and obviously I'm being completely tongue-in-cheek about any attention either one of us gets from this show, which is really, the only people who probably know about the fact that you and I are both on this show are people who you and I, did theater with, back in Tecumseh. But, we're working on that. That's great to hear in all seriousness that, you having been on the show was maybe a launching point for you to kind of get more proactive about being involved in the atheist community. And if they hear about the show, then maybe if you make some contacts over there, maybe some of them can come on the show, and we want to get this out there. We want to spread this out there, which actually is an interesting segue point for me to mention and remind our listeners that I am going to be at the American Atheists National Convention. We mentioned this at the end of last show. Doug, I'm not sure if you're caught up through last week's show, but yeah, we're going to be Daniel, Troy, myself. We're going to be at the American Atheists National Convention. It's coming up I think it's essentially Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'm going to be out there Thursday night because there's some pre-conference shenanigans going on that I want to be there for. But if anyone is listening to this just on the off chance that they're going to be at the convention or want to make it a point to come to the convention, I'll be there. We'll have a table. NIA is going to have a presence. I'm going to be there kind of pimping the show. So yeah, we're definitely working on getting the word out there. And Doug, thanks for doing your part. I loved your episode, man. I thought it went really well. How do you feel about it, listening back to it now in retrospect?
Yeah, so it was great, and I shared a couple of experiences that I had of people reaching out to me with you, just very briefly, but for the general audience as well. I feel that it gave me a voice in order to tell my story and in the proper platform, and it made me, more aware of the need to be more present and to be that sort of good representation of the things that I believe in. So, especially as I talked about, obviously coming out, and I had built my identity that I wanted to be a good representation of what it is to be a strong gay man. And then now, I'm transforming that even further, and I want to, establish more aspects of my identity. And as we talked about the visualization things and the tolerance scale and things, but yeah, so I am fully on board. I want to be a good representation of what it is to be an atheist, and I've gotten really good responses from people that have listened to the show, people that I hadn't talked to since high school that said,
really?
Yeah, I grew up in that same environment. I know what you're talking about. And it was really refreshing to hear, how you evolved and got into your, situation and your identity, because I can relate to that. So hearing from other people, and, I think I messaged you, Noah. I was like, Noah, it's working. Like what you're trying to do, it's working. We are reaching people. We are getting people to hear messages and relate to the things that we're saying. And I feel like that's the ultimate goal, not to speak on your podcast, but I feel like that's the ultimate goal, right? That we can relate to the messages and that we can have some sort of camaraderie in, yes, I have those feelings. It's nice to know that other people have those same feelings.
Absolutely. And it's helpful to get that type of affirmation from other people. I believe very strongly in what I'm doing, and I'm glad to hear that you're confident in what you're doing. But sometimes, frankly, it just really helps for someone else to say it, to be like, hey, I listened to this and it really meant something to me. And, and I'm very aware, but in two separate senses, that just any show, because everyone and their dead cat has a podcast now. So I'm very aware that it's hard to just kind of create a podcast, which anyone literally with a computer, a microphone, and an internet connection can do. So it's hard to just kind of cultivate an audience overnight. And then on the second topic, just the fact that atheism is already kind of a topic that does not taste very well going down to people who aren't interested in it. And then among the people who are interested in it, there's already a lot of options. I'm not naive. It's a kind of a saturated topic right now. There are a lot of atheist shows out there. We're not the only people doing this, not by a long shot. So, I guess to bring that all back around, I've gotten kind of discouraged a couple times, and I've referenced it on the show, that the audience isn't growing quite the way I had hoped, or that I kind of start to feel like, well, what am I doing this for? Is it really just my Facebook friends listening to it? But you've told me that people who I've never met, people who I've, have no earthly idea who they are other than the fact that they've listened to you on this show, have given you a lot of positive feedback on your episode. I've been reached out to. Troy has been reached out to. He actually sent me a really, really nice email that a graduate student sent him. And I won't give any more specifics than that because it's never our intention to out anybody. But she basically just said, hey, I think just kind of conflating NIA and the show as being the same thing, which in a lot of senses they are. But sent Troy a very nice email saying hey, I've discovered the show and I recently moved to this area for graduate school. And long story short, a lot of her contemporaries at her program just are very, very religious, and she feels very kind of out of place. And she discovered the show. She discovered NIA, and she discovered the show. And I'm like, hey, this isn't someone who I was already Facebook friends with. That's really cool to hear, And it kind of gave me a little bit of a juice, to get back out here and keep doing the show, because it does make a difference. And the longer we keep doing this, the more difference hopefully it'll make. How do you feel about that?
Absolutely. And I feel like you're going to go to this convention too and obviously promote the show, promote, NIA. And so all of those things. And I feel like it's difficult. It's going to be difficult for any, as you said, as saturated as the podcast market is just in general, it'll get there. I honestly believe that because I believe in the message. I believe in, the presentation of it. I think we're going about it the correct way. especially you going about it the correct way. And yeah, I'm excited to see the things that come, and keep on keeping on.
I appreciate that, Doug, and I'm really glad to have you back on. It was almost sort of, a lot of atheists don't tend to believe in, La Forza il Destino and things like that, the power of fate, but it really was kind of not totally happenstance that you just happened to message me. Like, we don't talk every day. I wouldn't even say that most weeks we talk at all any given week. We're in contact regularly enough, but the fact that you had been on the show, and I'm not casting any, shade at any of my other guests, because every interview I've done has been a blast, but you and I have been friends like forever. Like, compared to a lot of the other people who've been on the show, you and I just kind of have that rapport, that it takes, being friends for tens of and decades of years to really establish. And you just happened to message me literally as I was sitting there thinking, like, man, what am I going to do for the show this week? Like, neither of the guests that I was working on, quite worked out. I guess I'll just do another mini episode by myself, and hopefully, people will take that. But you messaged me, and I was like, oh my God, it was meant to be. Maybe I do believe in God after all. No, maybe it's just a coincidence that Doug messaged me, but it was a very fortunate coincidence, and I'm really happy to have you back on.
I am happy to be here. And I guess maybe we can segue into, the thoughts that I originally presented to you. So going off of the mini episode,
right? Yeah, because I have your statements, because that was what you messaged me about in the first place, was that you had just listened to the mini episode. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yes. So I was sitting there in my vehicle, because right now I'm still working in Toledo, only 2 more weeks, but I have an hour and a half each way drive, so I'm listening to a lot of things, speaking of saturated podcast markets, but so those actually appeal to me quite a bit right now. But,
right. Well, in fairness, because I probably should plug my Dead Cats podcast. Like, have you checked that out too?
I have not. I need to.
Well,
so I guess I'll put that on the list.
Okay.
Because I just listened to whatever. But anyways, so I was listening to the mini episode, and you were just talking about, how you had this moment of reflection, right? Where you really realize that you have all the fulfillment that you could crave in this world, right? That you have the things that you want, and you have the happiness, and yes, obviously we all struggle and go through things. And there's down days and bad days. But I was sitting there having just recently turned 30 years old, which was a moment of reflection for my own self. And I had gone through these similar thoughts of, I have a good career, I have a very supportive family, and I have a wonderful group of friends that gives me the social and the, validation aspects and everything that I want from a fulfillment factor. And I just kind of juxtaposed it against, if there was any listener being like, oh, Noah, it's easy for you to say that you have such fulfillment in your life because you have a beautiful wife and you have 2 beautiful children, and obviously you have a good career, and it's easy for you to say that. And right. I guess I was coming from it in the terms of, I am a single gay man, and I don't have children, and I guess it was just more of a reflection that you can be from any sort of situation and still have that same fulfillment, because I think that I probably have, the same sort of fulfillment things that you were speaking of in terms of happiness and just overall outlook on life. And even though I'm not married with children or not married and don't have that partner, you can fulfill the needs of being a human in any sort of way and in any sort of lifestyle. So I just that was kind of my thought process around what you were saying.
Right. And that's a point well taken, Doug, because I'm sure you're right that there are, and I feel like I acknowledged it, or I tried my best to acknowledge, my privilege and my good fortune that, throughout that mini episode, I was like, well, I do realize that I've caught a lot of breaks, and yes. You're right. Like, it is easy for me to be happy and fulfilled. And I guess the point that I was trying to make was to say, like, I'm a happy guy, and here are the reasons I'm happy. And it's not to say that you have to have all of these same reasons to be happy. It was really more to emphasize that God doesn't have to be one of those reasons.
Yes.
Noah being the happiest version of Noah doesn't have to look like Doug being the happiest version of Doug, and it doesn't have to look like, Sally being the happiest version of Sally, or whoever you might be. And the whole thing I was trying to do is to kind of just get people jacked up to think like there are good things in everybody's life, and you can be grateful for those things without having to attribute that gratitude to a space wizard. And I know I get myself in trouble when I use the term space wizard, but it just rolls so trippingly off the tongue. And I'm already on my second Jack and Coke, Doug. So I'm just gonna, that's where we're at. That's what's happening. Oh, so for the listeners, right before we got on the air, Doug messaged me. He's like, "Yeah, are you almost ready to record?" And I was like, "Yeah." I'm just checking all my equipment to make sure it works properly, which sounds like I was inspecting my private parts and like using a euphemism. And then Doug sent me a picture of the alcohol he's drinking, and I sent him a picture of the alcohol that I'm drinking. And I thought, man, if the government does spy on our phones, they probably think we're doing something way different right now than recording a podcast. But whatever. I'm having fun with it. Yeah. So you're a happy guy.
Too.
I'm a happy guy.
Exactly. And everybody can be a happy person. And I not to go too deep, but I feel like
no, go deep, Doug. Go deep.
I'm not gonna go too deep. But I don't remember if you. So I wanted to ask you this question because I don't remember if it was middle school.
The interviewer becomes the interviewee. I like it.
Yes. So it definitely happened in Tecumseh Public Schools. So this is why I'm bringing up the question.
Okay.
And I don't remember exactly what principal it was, but back when we were in school, and I think it was probably middle school, one of the principals would come over the morning PA system and give the morning announcements. And I remember at the end of every morning announcement, he would say, "Make it a great day or not, the choice is yours." Do you remember a principal saying that, or is it maybe it was just
it was a man? It was a man, right? I'm not sure because I'm always so careful to use people's names on the show, and maybe I'll just say his name, and if you agree that it might be the same person, then I'll just bleep his name out. Was it Does that sound right?
No, that doesn't sound right.
Because piss.
Maybe that's who it was. And
I'll edit his name out anyway. But I mean, you and I did realize on your first episode on the show that we were a little bit further removed from one another,
right,
chronologically than we realized. So it might have just been a different person. But that does ring a bell.
Okay, and I also think it's probably a quote from somebody else. Like the principal, this middle school or whatever principal probably used this saying, having heard it from someone else.
They probably read it in some book.
It's probably like a Paul Harvey quote or something. That's what I probably feel like it is. Like, it seems like something like Paul Harvey would say. But anyways, so, and like at the time, it was more of a joke than anything. Like, being that adolescent, everybody was not taking it seriously, but we all recognize that at the end of every morning announcement, the principal would say, "Make it a great day or not, the choice is yours." But I do feel that there's a lot of validity in that, and as a society, we often play the victim of the bad factors that are going on in life and the bad cards that we have been dealt. And again, and I agree, Noah, that you do a good job of checking your privilege, and I try to do the same thing, that, we recognize that we are in fortunate situations that have happened through, influences that are above our own control. But a lot of the things that we do have too,
there are a lot of ways where we can't really help the privilege that we kind of inherit. So I try to not shy away from it, and I try to just think, well, I've got this privilege. Like, whether I want it or not, I've got it. So either I can use it, to whatever degree I can, as a way to affect positive change, whether it's in a small way or a big way, or whatever way I can. I try to use that privilege to affect positive change rather than just perpetuating the status quo. Where the privilege that I have would just be mindlessly passed down to my children and then their children and then their children, because that doesn't help anybody, right?
Exactly. And also recognizing, though, that some of the things that we do have in our life were because of the choices that we've made, right?
Absolutely.
Like, there is direct correlation to the benefits and blessings that we have in our lives because of some of the, decisions and things that we've decided and the priorities that we've made. But that quote of make it a great day or not, like, we are, for the most part, in control of our own happiness. And like, to go back to what you were talking about, we can have that fulfillment, and a lot of it is a mindset of recognizing that, you are in control, and it is based off of your temperament. It's based off of who you surround yourself with. It's based off of those environments that you choose to be in. And, your whole life, you can choose to make it a great day, or you could choose to make it a crappy day. And
right.
If you go into each day with those kind of thought processes, and you're not answering to something else to make you feel guilty for whatever reason, you can have that fulfillment, and maybe it's even a little bit even more achievable in the fact that you don't feel like you have to answer to some sort of strict rules or some sort of strict guidelines that were put in place thousands of years ago.
But you were talking about how, like, people make choices and they feel guilty, and they like to attribute those feelings to a higher power, and I feel like that could go either way, right? Because really, just the idea in my mind of a lot of people who believe in a higher power, it's just kind of a cop-out for good or for bad. That when bad things happen, they can just say, oh, well, it's out of my control, it's God's plan. And when good things happen, they can say, oh, well, praise God, he's given me all of these wonderful blessings. But part of me kind of wants to be like, no, sometimes bad things happen, and that's terrible, and that's just the chaos of the universe. But like, when good things happen, own it. Like, you should be taking credit, like I'm very aware of my privilege, but at the same time, I think all of us should not be afraid to be like, yeah, I earned this. You know what I mean? Like, I have good things in my life because I deserve good things in my life, because I make good choices, and I do responsible things with my money, and I make responsible choices with taking care of my health and with choosing good people to surround myself with. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's the thing. Like, take ownership of the good times is equally as important of taking ownership of the bad times, and that your actions are what drive those things.
Right.
So you can learn from the things that maybe you regret and the things that you didn't handle the way you should have, because we all have those things. And it's equally as important to say, that was because of a decision that I made. And then also to say, the good things that are in my life are, ownership because of the decisions I made and the people I choose to surround myself with.
Right,
So
I feel
both
like
ways.
It does, and I feel like when bad things happen, especially when there are things that happen beyond our control, and people do just kind of have a tendency to say, well, that's just God's plan. No, like, that's such an excuse to not put effort into correcting things. You know what I mean? Like, when something bad happens, you should be ready and you should be willing to put in the work, to fight the fights, to make things better I think a lot of people, when they just say, well, it's just God's plan, they're kind of giving themselves permission to give up on fixing something, because they've kind of resigned themselves to the notion that it's out of their control. No, take control. Like, if something is out of control, take control, or at the very best, do whatever you can. Fight like hell. And if something is bad, if something is unfair or unjust, then do something about it. Do whatever you can. Don't just toss up your hands and act like it's all out of your control, so why bother? Like, that's the sort of mindset where religion kind of bothers me, where it kind of instills this sense of apathy in people when they believe that all of their decisions are preordained by a higher power. Like, I reject that. Like, sometimes things do happen outside of our control, but that is not okay to give yourself permission to not do anything about it, because of those beliefs.
I completely agree. And that all goes back to the fine wisdom of that middle school principle. Make it a great day or not.
Right.
The choice is yours. It really falls within your control, like your mindset. And I don't mean to diminish terrible, tragic things that happen, obviously. And I'm not trying to diminish the fact of, like, you're not in control of terrible illnesses and terrible things and situations. And so, again, I am checking the privilege that I'm a healthy individual and that, it's difficult if I woke up tomorrow morning and was diagnosed with cancer or some sort of strong illness. Obviously, that makes it much more difficult. I'm not trying
for
to
sure, and
that.
we've never lived through Hurricane Katrina in any meaning, or or something like that. But like that's kind of a perfect example, though, right? Because like the what I'm going off the rail about is the type of attitude where, let's just say Hurricane Katrina, okay? That happened. It was awful. There was nothing anyone could have done to prevent it, but it happened. And I think you've got all these people on Facebook and you know where I'm going with this, because they get on Facebook and here's what they do. Oh, thoughts and prayers. Oh, my thoughts and prayers are with all of the victims of hurt. No, like, they don't need your thoughts and prayers, man. They need your money. Like, get your debit card out. I'm serious. Like, and I know that there are plenty of people.
Right. No, I agree.
know that there are plenty of people who give charitably, particularly in the name of religion. So I'm not setting aside that there are plenty of people who do that. But you know that for every one person who actually reaches into their wallet, there are probably 50 more who just get on Facebook for self-serving purposes because they want to be a part of the attention and the sympathy. And they'll just say, oh, my thoughts and prayers go out to these people. Or the victims of any of the senseless shootings, that they'll just say thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers. No, that does nothing. That's just you giving yourself permission to do nothing and feel fine about it. And that bothers me. Like, either do nothing or do something, but don't do one and pretend you're doing the other. That's what pisses me off.
Because that's not you taking ownership and like actually contributing to the situation. That's you taking the most passive role that you could and then trying to pass it off as if it was you being an active participant in helping.
And you're not.
So, yes, I agree.
So don't patronize everybody and pretend like your thoughts and prayers are helping anyone, because they're not. So they're certainly not helping nearly as much as your $10 would or your $20 would. You know what I mean?
Yes, like, so that recent huge mass shooting that happened it was New Zealand, right? Is that accurate?
Oh,
the last mass murder?
Yeah, was it a mosque?
Yes. Was it New Zealand?
No, I think it was New Zealand. Yeah, I think it was. I mean, the sad part is that there are so many mass shootings these days that it's getting kind of hard to keep track of them all.
Right, exactly. That also speaks to it. But they also, like, as a country, like, right after that happened, they put a ban on, assault weapons. And it was, like, very reactionary. This tragic event happened. A week later, they passed this law, that really put into place gun control. And I remember seeing someone, and it kind of went viral. They were like, wait, didn't you guys even try thoughts and prayers? How could you advance directly to actually making new laws did you even try the thoughts and prayers method? Because we've been doing that for a while over here in the United States. And, like, it seems like, that seems like the reasonable approach to when you go through a tragic event of such mass tragedy, that the initial reaction, you can't actually pass something or do something. You're supposed to react with thoughts and prayers first. Like, did you guys even try to do that?
The sarcasm is strong with that one, it sounds like.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's put a bow on that one, because you and I are both drinking. Like, we'll be here till 4:00 in the morning talking about this same thing, and like. But
no, yes, and we have some fun topics.
Yeah,
to get to.
And this is actually a good time to transition over, because if we want to talk about organizations that are actually doing tangible good, and I want to say again, I want to always try to be balanced. Plenty of churches do a lot of tangible good. I'm not saying they don't. Churches can be an incredible force of charity and of goodwill and all of those kinds of things. So I'm not saying they can't, but we're just kind of talking about the examples of when they get it wrong. But To speak of an organization that's doing a lot of good, let's talk about NIA. That's obviously the partner organization of this show. We are the official podcast of Northern Indiana Atheists. I did get an update from Troy. We were hoping to do another audio segment, but Troy and I are both really busy guys, and it just wasn't able to be worked out. But he did send me just basically kind of a rundown of some things that are coming up on NIA's slate. And this will sound kind of dry, so I'll go through it pretty quickly, but just anyone who's listening to this, if you hear any dates or if you hear any events that catch your attention, please know that I'm going to basically copy and paste all of Troy's notes into the show notes. So if you hear anything, don't worry about rewinding it. Don't worry about that. Just listen to the rest of the show. Kick back, relax, finish pooping, whatever it is you're doing while you're listening to the show, and just go back afterwards.
I think everybody's drinking. I think everybody's drinking with us. I'm just assuming that everybody also has their own alcoholic
I was
drink.
wondering if anybody would even notice that I slipped in there. I just finished pooping, and because you know that, like, if 100 people listen to this show, statistically speaking, at least one of them will be pooping while they're listening to this, and they'll be like,
Absolutely.
So, okay. So here's what we got. Here's what's going on with NIA, per Troy Moss, the president of the board of Northern Indiana Atheists. We've got the Five Below. Are you familiar with Five Below, Doug, the store?
Oh, love me some Five Below.
There you go. So the Five Below Give Back fundraiser is taking place from April 13th through April 20th at all Goshen, Elkhart, and Mishawaka locations. Basically, just print and take the fundraiser flyer with you, which I'm assuming you could probably get at NIA's Facebook page, and take it with you to Five Below, and they will donate 10% of whatever you purchase back to NIA. So it's going to be April 13th through the 20th at basically the majority of Michiana Five Below locations. Thursday, April 18th at 6 p.m., NIA is hosting another Atheist Brew Talk at the Goshen Brewing Company in Goshen, Indiana. That sounds like some fun. We are also kicking off NIA's Biggest Loser Weight Loss Challenge. These are fun. You know, a lot of places do these Biggest Loser challenges. So if you're looking for an excuse to just start working on getting healthier, lose some weight, and it's going to be for charity. It's going to be starting April 21st, and basically the way it works is it's a standard Biggest Loser challenge, but if you win, you get to choose the charity that all of the winnings go to. So that's kind of a fun twist on it, and it's definitely a way that you can get healthier and that you can also make a really positive donation to the charity of your choice. Thursday, April 25th at 6 p.m., NIA will be hosting a coffee and conversation at the Electric Brew in Elkhart, Indiana. April 26th through May 2nd is Secular Week of Action. NIA has daily events all week. Some highlights include starting the week on April 26th by tabling on the lawn of the Elkhart County Courthouse in Goshen from 8 a.m. to noon. Stop by and see everybody there. April 28th, they'll be hosting a potluck, picnic, and Sunday service project at Potawatomi Park, which is in South Bend. I go there all the time. That's a lot of fun. And that's very family-friendly. Tuesday, April 30th, kicks off the spring clothing drive, trying to gather up some clothing for the homeless and the needy in our area. And lastly, Wednesday, May 1st, NIA will be at the Elkhart Environmental Center for another service project, walking the trails, clearing them of debris, picking up trash as they go. NIA will supply all of the tools that you'll need for the day. So there you go, Doug. That's everything that NIA is up to lately. And that last one I really like. They're actually going out and they're physically, literally making the world a better place. They're cleaning up the trash out there in some nature trails. So it doesn't get much more wholesome and helpful than that.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. I'm jealous.
Right? I know. NIA is out there kicking butt and taking names, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
And we just want to remind everyone listening that all Northern Indiana Atheist events are open to atheists and our allies. So you don't have to be a dirty heathen like me and Doug and Troy and Daniel and all of us. You can be anybody. And if you just want to do some good in the world and you don't mind working shoulder to shoulder with us godless folk, come on out to any of these events. We welcome everybody whose heart is in the right place and who has a mind to do some good. So to learn more about Northern Indiana Atheists or any of these events, you can go to northernIndianaAtheist.com. As I said, all of this information will be in the show notes. You can check out There Is No Godcast Facebook page. Just, if you're listening to this and you're interested in any of this stuff, go find it. We're not going to hide it from you. It's not an Easter egg hunt. It's almost Easter, so that feels like an appropriate joke to make.
That was appropriate.
Doug, thanks for your patience while we got through all that. Let's move on.
Absolutely.
I told you, I showed you an article, and I sent this to Troy. For anyone listening to this who's been with us since day one, when Troy was on the show, I mentioned to him my favorite pet theory on existence and the universe and all that. And do you remember what that was, Doug?
Yeah, simulation theory.
Simulation theory! And I found this article, and I wasn't seeking it out. Like, it was on the front page of Yahoo or wherever it is I saw it, talking about this very prominent scientist at MIT who gave an interview and kind of discussed his research, I guess you could say. I wouldn't say findings, but his research. And he is basically at the point where he is ready to declare that it is more likely than not, in his opinion, that we are all, in fact, living in some higher form of existence is computer simulation. And I sent that to Troy just because, his big thing when I interviewed him was, well, show me the evidence. And I was like, well, take a look at this, big boy. And I showed it to you. What do you think about the article?
So, first of all, I also enjoy the thoughts of simulation theory just as a concept.
Sure.
And oddly enough, I do feel like there's a correlation. So, at one point, I don't know if you were there or not, so again, I'm going to see if you remember this aspect of going back to when we were together. But I do feel that we had a Matrix marathon. Were you a part of that watching where we watched all 3 of the Matrixes?
Much
movies?
To my eternal shame and regret, Doug, I don't think I was, but I wish like hell I had been.
Oh, no! Because it was definitely our group. So, you must not have gotten the invite, but I mean, I guess I got
it was lost in the mail, I'm sure. Yep, all right. Busted.
So I'm going to say the name of the person that hosted it, and then we can edit this out. But,
oh boy, awkward.
It was at house, and I remember was there, and that's pretty much all I remember. I wasn't very engaged with the actual viewing.
Sure.
So I would have thought that maybe you would have been there.
It's. I mean, I did smoke a lot of crack back then, so maybe I was just completely.
Yes. I forgot that you were. Yes.
I like that. Oh yeah, gosh, darn! I forgot you were really into the crack back in the late 90s.
So we edited out the part where I said the name, and we are going to talk about the fact that Noah was way into crack in the 90s.
Yeah, we'll leave that part will stay.
Anyways, we did have a marathon of watching The Matrix, and in this article that you shared with me, it was drawing the correlations to the basic concepts of The Matrix. And I remember when I went to go watch this viewing, and we were watching all 3 movies back to back, and I hadn't ever seen any of the matrices. I hadn't seen any of the movies. And I wasn't that engaged with it because, again, going back to my story, I was very Christian. So I was like, what is this blasphemy of this, simulation world? And I can't understand in my 14-year-old brain what the hell this movie is trying to tell me anyways.
You can't learn Kung Fu from a computer. You have to go to church, and then you go to karate practice after church, and that's how it works.
Exactly. But I remember watching the movies, and I still remember, the basic concept of it. But I read the article, too, and I do just feel like, yeah, it's kind of a thought process, and I get where he's saying, just the probability, he's putting science into it and the probability of what the existence is. And I want to throw it back to you, Noah, because you said that, this is a theory that you've engaged in or at least kind of looked into. So I want to get your take on where you are with this whole simulation theory in terms of what it means to you or what your thoughts are on it.
Well, in fairness to Troy, and it's the reason why I didn't really go down that rabbit hole with him and why I wouldn't really go down it with many people, is that I can't really articulate a lot of scientifically justifiable reasons why I believe this. And I can't even really say I believe it. I just like the idea. It certainly makes a lot more sense to me than the idea of, the Christian explanations for the origins of the universe. And then the guy in this article, he actually does a really good job of articulating this, and I assume that's why the article is gaining such traction and making front page news at Yahoo, is that he's basically saying, look, the evidence for us being a computer simulation is right here in front of us because we are getting very close as an existing, existing reality to being able to duplicate these types of artificial universes, right? That's what I took away from the article. That he's basically saying look at what we have been able to do, what video game technology and computer technology and simulation technology, look where it's come just in the last 20 or 30 years, right? And you consider that we have been, as a human civilization, we've been around for what, 10, 15,000 years or something like that? I mean, the Earth is much older than that, but documented history only goes back a few thousand years. And he's saying, look, in the last 20 or 30 years, look how far we've come. Just imagine where we'll be in the next couple of 100 years. look, if we could figure this out, then if there were some level of reality or existence a step above us, just imagine where they could be at with computation power, with the ability to simulate things. Like, for all we know, when I die, that's just someone like, do you watch Rick and Morty? This sounds like
no,
a tangent.
I don't.
Okay, well, you really need to, because it's funny. There's an episode of the show that really kind of tackles this in a really brief but really brilliant way. They go to this arcade. It's like this intergalactic arcade. And the purpose of this game is that you put on this like helmet and you plug into it and you wake up as like a 4 or 5 year old boy, okay, named Roy. And kind of the whole idea, I assume, is that 4 or 5 years old is usually about the age at which we start to retain formative long-term memories, right? Like, most people can remember back to when they were about 4 or 5. So you plug into this game called Roy. You wake up as a 4 or 5 year old boy, and you're kind of groggy for a second, and then you basically just kind of accept that you are Roy. Like, his parents are there. He like wakes up from a bad dream, and he's like, "Oh, I dreamt I was this other person." They're like, "No, honey, you're Roy." And then like the joke is that you live as Roy. Like, and they condense it for the purpose of the joke of this show, but like, you live 40, 50, 60, 70 years as Roy, and then eventually you die. And when you die, you unplug from this machine, and like, you wake up and you ostensibly remember that you were someone else all along, even though you basically, in your mind, just experienced 40 or 50, 60 years living as this other person. And I watched that, and the show is brilliant. So if you don't watch the show, you should be watching the show. But I was like, that was a legitimately more moving and stirring moment for me from a spiritual standpoint than literally anything I ever heard in church in my entire life, because I had this moment where I was like, what if that's actually what is happening here? Like, what if I am just some avatar in some higher form of life or existence's, video game arcade? You know what I mean? And it was terrifying and also kind of interesting at the same time.
Absolutely. So, yeah, and like, obviously you can poke holes in many different theories.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, that can happen, but I know what you mean. And so, to take it to another reference, have you seen or read Ready Player One?
Oh, of course. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I feel like that, and when I was reading about simulation theory, and when I read that book, it was along the same thing, that in Ready Player One, the characters in this, society, I guess it would be dystopian, because I don't think it's really utopian.
Well, it's both. Like the quote-unquote real world is dystopian, but the Oasis is utopian.
Yes. So, but like, the fact that you could be, your existence is more in this virtual world than it is in this quote-unquote real world, right? So he has all these experiences that are in this virtual world, and everybody is more living in the virtual world, even in terms of, monetary aspects, even in terms of, they even touch on the sexual aspect, they get into the terms of that he's going into the virtual world to have sexual experiences instead of being in the real world and having sexual experiences.
Right, and I think they gloss over this. They gloss over a lot of this more in the movie than they do in the books. But if memory serves, in the books, like, the entire public education system takes place in the Oasis. Like, that's where
absolutely.
Yeah.
So from a conceptual level, though, as we talk about simulation theory as being something that could be existing, I think it has a lot of those similarities to that book and that story of, if we're advanced enough to even recognize that we have the real world, but still want to be in this virtual world because of all the things that it could bring, what's not to say then that what we're in right now is one of those virtual aspects or virtual simulations? So
right, and I think he mentions
drew the comparisons between those two things.
Right, and he mentions, I think, in the article at one point, having this sort of aha moment where he say he was like playing like virtual ping pong or something like that, or table tennis.
Yes.
And he was like it was a small thing, but he said, like, when I got done, For anyone listening to this show who hasn't read the article, he basically says, I got done playing this virtual ping pong. And by virtual, I mean like full, he's got the helmet on and he's got like the gloves on and, because these VR things are getting to be pretty sophisticated. And he said, I'm playing the game. And when I got done, I instinctively set the paddle down on the table. Now, bear in mind, he's describing a table and a paddle that don't actually exist physically. But he says, like, I set it down on the table and I dropped the controller because, like, my brain momentarily just sort of lost sight of the fact, the lines blurred. And what he's basically saying is that, like, they're not stopping this development. Like, they're going to, it was a minor thing that happened to him, but they're just going to continue making these games even more realistic and even more immersive. And, like, who knows where the line gets drawn? Who's to say that the world we're living in is not, the finished product of some advanced society? It makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, like, also when you think about, and I don't know, this goes into the context of outer space and the galaxies and everything, like how massive just the universe around us is, right? And I think he speaks to the probability of that he believes that it is greater than a 50% chance that it is simulation theory. But also, like, just when you think about the magnitude of our entire universe system, like, just as a thought process, it just seems like there's more things out there. And so for me personally, I can kind of get behind the simulation theory in terms of just thinking that, yeah, maybe there is, I could see someone wanting to simulate all of these different variables. I could see someone wanting to simulate what would happen if I made a Doug Furgason that, grew up in Tecumseh, and how would that affect the world, and, like, the effects of climate change, and, like, the effects that people could have on different things, and, like, actually trying to simulate all those different factors, you know? So
right.
I could see that as a possibility. Or, like, even extending it out further to another reference of, like, Doctor Who, right? So he, am I getting that wrong? Who's the guy in the Avengers that can
Doctor
simulate
Strange?
all the Doctor Strange. I don't know why I said Doctor Who. Doctor Strange. So he can simulate every possibility of any combination of different things. So if someone had that capability, wouldn't they, do that? And maybe that's the existence of what we're doing, is they have to establish all those different variables on top of each other, and the only way to do that is to actually have the simulation of it.
Right. And if they have the computation power, then why wouldn't they? It's just like basically a giant, model to and who knows what the actual purpose of that model would be, but we wouldn't necessarily have any way to be aware of that.
Exactly. So yeah, edit out that part where I said Doctor Who instead of Doctor Strange.
No, that's staying. No, that's staying in there. Nope, it's staying in the show, Dougie. But I want to say, like, that's the part that terrifies me, right? Because when it comes to simulation theory, there are basically two ways that it could go, and one terrifies me, no more so than the idea that there's just no God or no simulation theory, but the one that terrifies me is the idea that we are all artificially intelligent, right? That, like, nothing about our lives will exist once we cease to live. That kind of terrifies me a little bit, but I really do like the Roy theory. I'm going to have to send you the name of that episode, whatever that you can watch the episode without having watched the other episodes, and you'll still be able to follow it just fine. It's a brilliant comedy cartoon. But I really like the idea of the Roy model, because there's something about me that just, I fear death. I've been very open about this, I think, in my earlier Facebook Live videos. Like, I'm terrified of death, and I totally get that's why that's a big component of what people seek in religion, is just kind of seeking comfort to push back against the fear of death, the belief that there is an afterlife and that it's, it's heaven. But I like the idea that, well, maybe once I die, there is still a possibility that I can see my loved ones again. My wife, my kids, my friends, my parents, my grandparents. Like, maybe they just stopped playing, and maybe every night when I go to sleep, I think I'm sleeping. Maybe when we're sleeping, it's just really when we're not playing the game, and I don't know. There's some comfort to be found in the idea that I can believe that it's conceivable that when I die, there is something else after for me, without having to believe in a sky wizard. Like, I don't see any, I would love to believe in a sky wizard if I could make myself do it, but there's just not evidence there for it. And there's not really any evidence for simulation theory either, but it makes a lot more sense to me than Christianity does, to be sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that obviously we would like to believe that we can reconnect with the people that we've met in this existence that we have. And so, yeah, I think everybody, that's a universal thing that we would want to have that possibility. So anything that allows for that possibility is definitely a comforting aspect of our life and our existence, for sure.
Absolutely, for sure. All right, Doug, any final thoughts on that, or are you ready to move on?
No, I'm ready to move on. And I want to go back to speaking about good things, because I do feel like we kind of started off the episode speaking about maybe, I don't know, being maybe a little bit too critical. I don't think I was too critical, but I do want to talk about good aspects. So you talked about the great things that are going on with NIA and all the good things that they are doing. And I want to speak about, and another topic, of a really good representation of a Christian that, in my opinion, is a really good representation of a Christian that uses their beliefs properly, as far as I know, and is now running for president. Is that where we could transition into?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was transitioning into. So thank you for getting there for me. We're talking, of course, about South Bend Mayor, your friend and mine, Pete Buttigieg, and he has been in the news a lot lately because he's Hansel. He's just so hot right now. Hansel.
Yes.
Pete Buttigieg.
Right,
he is absolutely the Hansel of the 2020 presidential election right now, and I could not be more excited because I, of course, I'm out here in the Michiana area. He is beloved out here. He's been beloved to us for a lot longer than he's been, kind of catching fire on a national scale. But I couldn't be more excited about it. And he has recently drawn the ire of our illustrious Vice President, who I know you're a giant fan of, Mike Pence.
I just love that Mike Pence. He's just, yes, there's no sarcasm in that statement.
No, none whatsoever. So what are your thoughts on the whole thing so far?
So, yes.
Have you been watching him? Have you been seeing Pete, like, on the show? He's been making the talk show circuit. I mean, he's been everywhere lately. Have you been seeing his interviews?
Yes. So, I am new to the Mayor Pete game. And so, obviously, as you spoke, you obviously were exposed to him earlier. But I am currently in the process of listening to his Audible book, so that's part of my commute.
Awesome.
And so...
Which he narrates, too,
because, right? Yes. So that makes it even better, the fact that he's narrating it. So he's telling his story through his own tonation and through his own voice. So, I'm still learning more about him. I will say, I haven't decided fully if that's the, candidate that I want to back yet. I still think that, I'm still in the process of deciding who I want to support, because obviously... It's not that I need to fully get behind a candidate at this point, and I want to hear everybody's defense.
Sure. So and it's a big decision.
Right, and even though I agree, and I will say on the very foundational level, obviously I agree with him, and I'm just here to say that just because he's a gay white American does not mean that I am fully supporting him to begin with. So I'm still doing my homework on everything that is involved. But I do like a lot of the messages that he's saying. And so, yeah, let's talk about what his thought processes are. And he has been in the news recently, obviously, against talking to Mike Pence. And so part of the thing that I watched just recently was his interview on Ellen. And Ellen was asking Pete, what his thoughts were on religion, and kind of just the fact that Pete and Mike Pence have the same religion, but they use it in different ways, obviously.
Right.
Which I thought was really interesting. And I don't know, just the whole thing, he said, and I'm quoting it because I wrote it down, Pete said, "I have a problem with religion being used as a justification to harm people." And
amen.
I agree with that, and I feel like that's what Pence does is he uses it as a justification for just, his poor beliefs in that there's lesser people on this earth, and I don't really understand. So then I was reading what Mike Pence's response was to the entire situation. And here's a quote from Mike Pence. He says, he knows I don't have a problem with him. I don't believe in discrimination against anybody. I treat everybody the way I want to be treated. And that is a direct quote from Mike Pence, which I don't know how he can honestly say that. Like, how can you honestly say, I don't believe in discrimination against anybody. I treat everybody the way I want to be treated.
Well, can I answer can I answer your question literally? You can't. You can't please. Honestly say that if you're Mike Pence. I mean, like, his record speaks for itself.
Right. Like, yeah, so I was reading everything. I watched the Ellen interview. I was obviously agreeing with all the things that Mayor Pete had said. And I was like, I'm just curious what Mike Pence's response was to this. And then for me to read that was his literal response was, he knows I don't have a problem with him. I don't believe in discrimination against anybody. I treat everybody the way I want to be treated. And I'm like, liar! You are lying through your teeth. Like you can't honestly believe that you are treating everybody the way you want to be treated when you're saying that someone's existence of just who they are is something that's not allowable in the government that you were trying to promote.
Right. Or at minimum, he has advocated and attempted to implement, laws, not just in the state of Indiana, but now as the second highest, ranking government official in our country, policies that would make it permissible to fire someone from a job for being gay, policies that would allow a business to refuse to serve someone because of their being gay or bi or transsexual or, any of those things. And I don't know if it was in the Ellen interview or maybe just in one of the articles I wrote or I read, subsequent to that, where they quoted some questions, some basic yes or no questions that they asked Mike Pence to say well, yes or no, do you believe it's okay to, fire someone because they're gay or whatever it was. You probably remember what I'm talking about. And he wouldn't answer it. He would not give a yes or no answer. He would just go back to these, well, I believe that I have my faith and everyone's entitled to have their faith. And it's well, you're basically saying yes without saying yes, to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
But Mayor Pete, I love, because Mayor Pete, whether the answer was yes or no, he would just say, yeah, and here's why, or no, and here's why, and he would actually stand by his answers. And I don't know if you noticed this too, but one of the things I love about Mayor Pete, whenever the topic of religion comes up, and I don't know if you caught this, but he's very consistent about it, because I've watched damn near every significant interview he's given when it comes to major media outlets. Whenever people ask him about religion, he always says the same thing when describing people, which is that he supports people of any religion or no religion. And every time he says that, I'm like, thank you, Mayor Pete. Thank you for being someone who sticks up for me just as much as he sticks up for his own beliefs or anyone else's beliefs, because that's what the president ought to be, right? Someone who sticks up for the right to believe in anything or nothing. And he always makes it a point to recognize that verbally and proactively and vocally. And I don't know of any other candidate that I can think of, certainly not in this current election cycle, who makes it as much of a point to recognize the growing segment of our society, which are the nuns, right?
Absolutely. And yes, I actually wrote this note down. So as I was watching the Ellen interview, this is one of the bullet points that I put that I wanted to speak about, because it is true. I really felt that it was great of him to recognize that what he said is that it's important for anyone who steps into a political space to speak of any faith or people of no faith. So what you were saying, recognize that you can speak on the behalf of a certain faith. You can speak on the purpose of no faith, and both are equally valid. But as long as you're aware of where you fall and what you do, that's equally as important. So just recognizing the fact, like you said, that there's the nuns. That's something that hasn't been there. And so I do, as do you, appreciate the fact that he at least recognizes that. And to go back further, as we were speaking about good Christians, I really do feel like he is a great representation of Christianity in its good qualities and in the qualities that it should be, in recognizing of other belief systems and everything else. I do truly believe that he is a good representation of what the Christian belief should be, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I think he's kind of the Rocky Balboa in this situation where, maybe Donald Trump is not Apollo Creed, but maybe the presidency itself is Apollo Creed, where, I'm basically saying he's got the skill, he's got the talent, he's got the heart. But I think if I'm being honest with myself, I still don't know that there's any realistic path to him being elected, just because he's so young. He's so, he will run up against more seasoned politicians, even within the Democratic primaries. And I just don't think that it's necessarily going to happen. I'd like to believe that it could. I mean, Donald Trump was elected president, so why the hell couldn't it? But my point is, I don't know that Pete Buttigieg is the next president of the United States. I can tell you that if you literally lit a dumpster on fire, it would make a better president than our current president. So I would love it if he were. I don't think it's going to happen, but my honest opinion is that I don't think even his own team probably would have expected him to take off in the way that he has, and I think that it's wonderful for him. I think that he's a wonderful human being. You don't have to agree with all of his policies or any of his policies, but I think his heart is in the right place, and he's very genuine, and I think at minimum, he is the next governor of the state of Indiana. You know what I mean? Like, I think this is the kind of exposure that will make him damn near a shoo-in for taking that next step. And I don't know that next step is the presidency, because he'd be skipping, 2 or 3 or 4 steps, from where he is now to where he would be in the White House. But I think this is going to do great things for his career. And who knows if he does, get elected to the governorship or to a U.S. Senate seat, at the next opportunity. I think Pete Buttigieg is someone who's going to be doing a lot of good things for our country for a long time.
Yes, and I agree. And I think that at the minimum, he is advancing the conversations. And he's advancing the conversations that need to be had. He's bringing up the correct topics, and he's bringing it up in the correct manner, that he's well articulate. He's I obviously am not. He's articulating it in the proper format of making people understand and trying to convey these thoughts. So at the very minimum, if he doesn't get, the Democratic nomination, which I agree he probably will not, but I do think that there's a real chance that he could be a vice president. I could definitely see him on a ticket with whoever the Democratic
Sure, Elizabeth Warren or Bernie or whoever one of these, or Joe Biden. Yeah, I think the biggest problem he's got right now is that this popularity has kind of gone viral, right? But virality or I don't know what the right way of, but you know what I'm saying. To be viral is fickle, and I think that the biggest problem working against Pete right now, aside from his relative inexperience in terms of how young he is that he's peaking too soon. Like all of this attention he's getting right now, like it's we're not even halfway through 2019, and we're talking about the 2020 presidential election, and the 2020 presidential election takes place in the 11th month of the year 2020. So like we just have such a long way to go, and I just don't know how any candidate, short of the second coming of Christ himself, could sustain this type of fervor and popularity for almost the better part of 2 years, at this point, that it would have to take for him to actually be elected. So I don't know. I just don't see it being realistic, but I'm going to support him like hell as long as he's in the race. Cause like I have a coworker who I remember telling last presidential election, before Trump even got the nomination, I just dismissed him because I thought there's no way it could ever happen. And then guess what? He's our president now. So I'm going to use that same concept, but I'm going to flip it because I dismissed him in a negative sense. I'm not going to make the same mistake of dismissing Pete Buttigieg in a positive sense because I actually think he would make a wonderful president. So even though I don't think it's realistic, I almost said the F word. Screw it. I'm going to support him like hell until the very day he drops out of the race, because I got nothing to lose. And I think, he's the president for me. I've already kind of made my choice. And I, just like you or anyone else listening to the show, I could certainly respect that there's a lot of time left for people to make that, very important decision. But that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. And I don't remember what interview he did, and I don't remember the exact context, but I remember seeing some sort of comparison that he was on some sort of morning show, and the general buzz and the fervor, as you spoke of, that came from it, they said hadn't been anywhere comparable until they related it back to the first time that they had an interview with Barack Obama at really the similar phase. And I think that if you drew the comparison, I mean, Obama wasn't ever regarded as a viable. So even though you're saying that, Trump kind of wasn't a viable, thought of becoming president, Obama wasn't a very viable thought as becoming president either. Obviously, he's had a little bit more political experience.
Yeah,
back
yeah. I mean, he was a United States senator
and
at the time.
Had the track record. Right. But yeah, I and going back to it, like I said, at the very minimum, he's advancing the conversation in the correct format, and enough for you and I to speak about it on this podcast. Enough for, him to challenge our current vice president into having to address it. So at the very minimum, at least that these conversations are getting into the public context and getting the, exposure for people to have to think about it. So at the very minimum, at least, we're getting there, and we're advancing a little bit further into the terms of conversations that I hope as a society, we can have and think about.
Right, for sure. And whether he's, on paper qualified for the job or not, our current president is, a 70-year-old, playboy, misogynist, xenophobic, lizard person. So, like, dude,
right.
Maybe like a 37-year-old gay mayor from South Bend, Afghanistan war veteran. I mean, like, dude, come on. Like, this dude is legit. He's totally legit. So, hey, by the way, Mayor Pete, open invite to come on the show. I was talking with Molly about that the other day. I was like, hey, please. I mean, we're in South Bend, man. Pete. This is the epicenter. I could die if Mayor Pete, like, and I've talked to Molly about this, like, we should try to, like, reach out to him. It's such a dumb thing, because he's going on, like, Bill Maher and The View and, like, all that stuff. But he is still ostensibly the mayor of South Bend, which is where we are. So I don't know, like, maybe we'll try. Who cares? Maybe I'll try and, like, tweet at him or something, see what happens.
Yes. And I do feel like I said, Mayor Pete is the type of Christian that is a very wonderful representation. Like, I feel like if he knew about this podcast, he would embrace it in the terms that he would be behind the message of what we're trying to say and like what we are trying to convey, and is obviously respectful of that aspect. I don't see Mayor Pete as, this strong evangelical that believes in his belief system and in trying to get people on board, or looking down on any other sort of belief system or anything else like that. Those are the things that I like about him, and in terms of his religious beliefs and everything that I've heard. And that's what I appreciate. And in the same way, I do feel like I want to have those same viewpoints and feelings of not only Christians, but like other belief systems. Like, if that is, I do truly believe that if that's giving you fulfillment and that's what you believe in, then you're no more right or wrong than I am, and do whatever makes you happy. And if that gives you fulfillment, then that's great. Just don't try to project what you believe and what your thoughts are, that it would be a lack thereof for my own self.
Right, and Mayor Pete's the kind of guy who walked the walk, right, in the most realistic way possible. The guy went overseas. The guy went to Afghanistan. The guy literally faced death, to protect and to show his appreciation for the rights of every American citizen to believe or not believe in whatever God they wanted or not wanted to believe or not believe in. Like, he's done those. Like, that's not just like hyperbole. Like, he went there. Like, he's went overseas, and he's in the army, and he actually is saying, like, you know what, I believe in this country, and I've put my life on the line for this country. Like, it does not get more authentic than that. Like, if anyone had any kind of questions as to whether or not he's just full of it, like, well, he could have gotten shot. Like, that's real. He could have gotten shot over there, and we wouldn't be talking about Mayor Pete Buttigieg running for president because he would have died. Like, he went over there and he faced that possibility. He didn't have bone spurs. Like, he chose to do this. And that's on top of the fact that he was a Rhodes Scholar who went to Harvard, who speaks like 7 languages, who, blah, 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 blah. The dude is just awesome. Mayor Pete, come on the show. I'm sure I could do wonders for your career. So,
yes.
Hey, Doug, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Did you order your shirt?
Yes, I ordered my shirt.
I knew you would. I knew I could count on you for that.
You knew the answer to that question before you asked it, which is entirely fine.
Yes.
But of course I ordered my shirt.
But it was my way.
I'm very happy.
It was my way of segueing into our fine. We're going to start wrapping up. We've been at this for over an hour. Just a reminder for everyone listening to this. We want your support. I need your help. So, and you want nice shirts, and I'm actually wearing my Ting hoodie right now. It's really nice. It's quite comfortable, actually. So if you haven't already, go check out our bonfire campaign. That'll be in the show notes as well. There's only a couple days left, guys. Get over there and get your sweet merch. There's only a couple days left.
If me as a gay man was like, you know what, that suits my fashion style, then that can suit anybody's fashion style, all right? Like, I am going to be very excited when I get that T-shirt to wear it around because it's very fashionable.
Is this like Ting Eye for the straight guy?
Yes. So, listen, those are very fashionable shirts, and I am excited to wear it. So, listen, you need to buy a T-shirt. I completely agree. And I am endorsing this T-shirt as a great addition to your wardrobe.
So you're saying I'm Doug Furgason and I support this wardrobe? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Doug, I got a question. I got another question for you because I have got I think 3 shirts. I think I referenced this on the last show that I was going to do something like this, but I need your help. Because we're going to be at the American Atheist Conference, as we talked about earlier. I've got 3, count them,
yes.
1, 2, 3 T-shirts. I've got 2 unisex, and I've got 1 women's cut shirt to give away. And we're talking about, dudes, I paid for these shirts. I bought these shirts. I paid for them with my own money, and they're like walking advertisements for the show. They're free. So if you are at the American Atheist Conference, just come see us at the table. I haven't exactly figured out how to decide how to give them away. Do you have any ideas?
No, but I absolutely love this idea. 1, because whatever we determine is the rule that they have to say, I think it should just be like a secret phrase. So we need to come up with a secret phrase for them to come up to the booth. You sit, obviously when you say this phrase, Noah will recognize that you are a listener of the show. Somehow you've listened to our drunken ramblings.
Right, that you made it to an hour and 15 minutes. So, like, that's dedication.
Yes. Exactly. So we have to determine what this secret password is right now, Noah.
Okay.
Because
whoever
has survived
thought.
this long episode deserves a shirt. And when they come up to you at this convention and say whatever it is, you're going to be so excited, and it's going to be an amazing experience. And I really hope it actually happens.
Okay. So are you familiar with Ghostbusters?
Yes.
Okay. So do you know the whole movie, like, because Rick Moranis and Sigourney Weaver, they get possessed, right? And they're wandering around the whole, they're wandering around the whole movie, and they're asking everybody they meet, are you the gatekeeper? Are you the key master? And they're walking around asking everybody this. So my idea is that anyone who's going to be at the American Atheist Conference, if you're listening to this right now, find the Northern Indiana Atheists. There is no Godcast table. I'll be there. Just come up to the table and ask me, are you the Godcaster? And if you ask me that question, I will say, are you the shirt keeper? And if you get this shit right, you won yourself a free shirt, my friend. What do you think, Doug?
Yes! I love it. I love it.
All right. So
One, I love that we're rewarding someone for surviving through this entire episode, which I actually feel like it's going to be a good episode. So I think y'all are going to enjoy it. But also, I just really want this to happen. I want this to be someone who's innocently listening, going to the convention, giving you this phrase, and I think it's absolutely perfect.
Okay,
So,
I love
yes.
it. I love that you love it. So here's what it is, guys. Just come up to the table and ask, are you the Godcaster? If someone comes up and asks me that, I will light up like a Christmas tree on December 25th. And if you ask if I'm the Godcaster, I will ask if you are the shirt keeper, and you will get a free There Is No Godcast shirt. There's 3 of them. So it's, while supplies last and all that. But even if you miss out, you can still buy a shirt. I mean, that's still totally an option available to you.
Oh, my God. How great is it going to be when 37 people come up to you, Noah, at this convention and say, are you the Godcaster? And be like, I'm sorry, you are the 38th person that has asked me that.
You know what, though?
And then you're not
that
even
would be
excited anymore.
That would be a great problem to have. I would, because I'm seriously and I'm being very transparent here. I'm being very vulnerable right now, Doug, in saying that, like, I think this is kind of a fun idea, and I think it's entirely possible that not a single person will, like, hear this. I know. But, like, I'm so hopeful that this Hail Mary winds up in somebody's hands, because I'm going to give away the shirts no matter what. Like, if it gets towards the end of the conference and, like, nobody has, actually, what I think is the most realistic outcome, if we want to be real here, is I think people who come to the table at the conference, and we also printed out some pamphlets to hand out at the show, it's entirely possible that, like, someone who's at the show, because it's a 3-day conference, right, will they will discover the show, and they will be listening to these words that I'm speaking right now and be like, oh shit, I should go back to that table and ask if he's the Godcaster and get a free t-shirt.
Which would be equally as great.
Yes.
Because then you know that you communicated the show properly and you already engaged an audience member. So all of this, regardless of what happens, I believe that it will happen. And it's going to be great.
And you already ordered yours. I don't have to give you any crap, because you were, like, I think one of the first people to get on board. And Doug, I appreciate your support, man.
Right.
Thanks for coming back on the show. I think we're going to wrap things up. I got to go to bed. Man, oh man, it's late and I'm a little bit drunk. So, hey, if you made it this far, I don't know what is wrong with you that you listened to all of this, but thank you for sticking with us. Whether you get a free t-shirt out of it or not, I really appreciate your support. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on Twitter @NoGodcast. Check out Doug. I mean, Doug's out there on social media. You can find him.
I am out there, and I am single. So if there's another attractive gay man out there, you come hit me up, because you can come get it.
Doug, what's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter, well, get me on Instagram, because you can't actually see the way I look on Twitter.
Oh, am I too old? I don't even have an Instagram. What's your Instagram?
I know. My Instagram is DOFURG. So, Doferg. Hit me up on there. Slide into my DMs and let's talk.
All right.
You don't even have to be a gay man. You can be whatever you want. I just love conversation and talking.
All right, Doug. Well, send me that. Send me that on Messenger, and I'll make sure and put that in the show notes too. Don't forget to support Northern Indiana Atheist, guys. Check out the show notes. They've got a lot of really good stuff coming up. I rambled on about all of it. I wouldn't expect you to remember it all, but if you have any inclination towards participating, join Northern Indiana Atheists. Show up at one of the events if you want to just dip your toe in the water and see how it feels. You never know. Maybe you'll like it. That's all I've got for us this week, Doug. I hope everybody comes back next time. On behalf of myself, on behalf of Doug Furgason, don't stop not believing.